And Senator McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President. There is a fog of confusion around the way the Commonwealth is handling negotiations on housing with the states and territory governments, and I'll tell you why. In the Northern Territory, Minister Scullion stood up at a community in Arnhem Land and commended the Northern Territory government for putting forward $1.1 billion in terms of its housing, and it agreed to continue the partnership of $1.1 billion over 10 years. So there is confusion here when the Prime Minister says on Friday that that's not the case. And I certainly call on the Minister and the Prime Minister to be much more clearer in the deliberations and negotiations that you are having, because you're sending very, very confusing signals. Today we have heard all the words about improving outcomes for First Nations people, about closing the gap, about aspirations to improve the life outcomes for us, our children, our families, and I don't doubt the Prime Minister's intentions when he says he wants to see more and do more, see real improvements. And you can't get much more real and solid than bricks and mortar housing. Good quality housing underpins all of the closing the gap targets in health, education and employment, as well as community safety. Good housing is the key to strengthening communities, particularly remote communities, and improving lives. This government knows this. In fact, it says this in its own Closing the Gap report. Yet this government has refused to clarify if they actually have any real commitment to improving the enormous need for remote housing needs. The Indigenous Affairs Minister, Senator Scullion, refused to clarify what, if any, plans he has to extend or replace the 10-year $5.4 billion National Partnership Agreements on Remote Housing, NAPARIA, which expires in June 2018. Senator Scullion was given every opportunity today to explain what plans he has to put on the table, his positive plans for improving the dire, desperate need for remote Indigenous housing, and he couldn't do it. Senator Scullion could not say how many new houses his government would commit to building. He could not say how many families would benefit from new or improved housing. He could not say how the federal government plans to meet the additional 5,500 homes estimated by his own review to be required by 2028 to reduce levels of overcrowding in remote areas. Despite the 10-year plan expiring in 4 months and the budget being handed down in 3 months, the minister cannot give any indication of how his government is going to tackle the enormous need for housing in remote areas. And this is what failure sounds like. But it's not Senator Scullion who lives with this failure. It's the family in Alice Springs town camp sharing one bathroom with 20 other people because extended family members have no housing. It's an elderly woman sleeping outside in the front yard in 45-degree heat because her home doesn't have air conditioning. It's the elderly disabled man living on an outstation whose toilet hasn't worked for weeks, being given a rubber plunger and told to fix it himself. Senator Scullion mentioned housing refurbishments and seemed to think they were not needed and a waste of money. The Remote Housing Review said the evidence is clear that houses deteriorate quickly without ongoing maintenance and repairs. Having invested $5.4 million into this program, you would think that Senator Scullion would see it as a priority for the government to protect its investment and increase the longevity of houses by maintaining the housing already delivered. Keeping housing maintained and functional plays a huge role in overcoming housing shortages and overcrowding. And just to put on the record another finding from the review, and I quote, "Under the Community Housing and Infrastructure Program, CHIP, the Fixing Houses for Better Health surveys found that only 9% of household faults are caused by tenants. The misconception that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families cause the majority of damage and deterioration to remote Indigenous housing needs to be corrected. Absolutely. A focus on tenant education is important, but so too is delivering good, quality and appropriate housing that meets building standards." But housing isn't just about bricks and mortar. It's also about jobs and economies, especially in remote areas. So come on, Minister, come on, Prime Minister, get on with the job and support our housing.
Thank you, Senator McCarthy. Your time has expired.